listening to the Big Blue Marble Podcast with Anwar Knight.
In just a few days, representatives from nearly 200 countries will come together at Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. It is a resort town known as the Pearl of Egypt, attracting many tourists each year with the lure of beaches and world-class scuba adventures as it kisses the crystal-clear water shores of the Red Sea. But the guests arriving in November are not tourists. 30,000 delegates will arrive to take part in a global meeting to coordinate climate action for the next year. It's an event referred to as COP27. Hello, and thank you for listening and watching. For meeting for the first time, welcome. My name is Anwar Knight, and I'm your host here on the Big Blue Marble Podcast. On today's show, I wanted to focus in on what exactly is COP27 and why you should care about it. We can no longer tune out. We need to tune in and be a part of the solution of our changing planet. I know there are so many terms and buzzwords that are reported endlessly in the media, and it can be confusing. What does it all mean? Well, don't feel bad if you don't know what COP27 is all about. You're not alone. But it is important that we all know what efforts are being made, and to be honest, not being made, to help save our planet. So today, I wanted to spend some time with you to share with you the 5 key things about COP27 and why it is so important. So, let's begin. Number 1, what is COP27? Well, it is a United Nations Climate Conference. It stands for the Conference of the Parties, COP, the 27th edition. It is a 2-week-long conference featuring talks and discussions between global leaders to discuss their climate commitments and work out ways for coordinating those efforts to combat climate change going forward. The nearly 200 countries or participants are collectively acting together to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations, and that's at a level that could prevent catastrophic consequences in the future. Now, the parties or nations have almost met annually. There were some dates that got moved around and delayed because of the COVID pandemic. And a different city every year plays host. This year, as indicated, it is being hosted at one of the most famous resort towns in southern Egypt. It should be noted the host city this year is quite controversial, with Egypt's presidency scarred with a poor record on human rights, and that should not be ignored. However, at the same time, the fact remains African countries will face some of the worst impacts of climate change. They do rotate nations to make it inclusive. As we know, the climate emergency literally affects everyone on Earth. I mean, if you just think back in the last 6 months alone, from the incredible intense Hurricane Ian that devastated parts of Florida as well as eastern Canada, to the catastrophic flooding in Pakistan, and the historic deadly heat in Europe. It was the hottest summer in 500 years. All of these countries that are joining in have signed on and, in theory, committed to the UN Climate Change Convention. I say in theory because action certainly speaks louder than words. Number 2, who attends? Well, as we briefly highlighted, representatives from nearly every country on Earth. More than 200 governments have been officially invited. However, some leaders of major economies, including Russia, are not expected to attend, although apparently delegates from that nation will likely be there. And at last check, China also has not confirmed. We don't know whether their leaders will take part, which is unfortunate as China is the world's largest consumer, producer, and importer of coal. But the invite list also includes environmental charities, scientists, community groups, businesses, and faith groups. And that's important to note because it helps nurture accountability and awareness. They help ensure that we all have a seat at this table, if you will. Number 3, how does the Paris Agreement fit into this? Well, 6 years ago at COP21, world leaders adopted what was called the Paris Agreement or Paris Accord. It was the first time that the world's nations came together and ratified a single agreement on tackling global warming and cutting greenhouse gas emissions. It is, and this is really important, it is a legally binding international treaty on climate change. So out of that, a commitment was made by the parties to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius. Preferably, the target range is 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. Now, 1.5 degrees, that is the key target that scientists agree will substantially help reduce, not stop, more on that later, but help reduce the harmful effects of climate change on people and nature. This meeting at COP27 circles around the original commitment of that 1.5 degrees that was internationally accepted some 6 years ago. Number 4. What will happen at this year's conference? Well, over the 13 days, they will reveal their respective plans for contributing to the set goals and report on their progress to date on tackling climate change. Last year's meeting in Glasgow resulted in some ambitious new goals put into the mix. This year, it's how do we fulfill those goals? This conference will focus on 3 main areas. 1 will be reducing emissions. 2, helping countries to prepare and deal with climate change. And how do they adapt to it? And that's crucial because the impacts, as we mentioned, are already well underway. And the 3rd main theme is securing technical support and funding for developing countries to carry it out. Funding has been a sticky point for many nations. Who's going to pay? And how much should each contribute? There is a great need to finance countries to help them recover from the effects of climate change as well as to prepare for it, such as implementing clean energy systems and newer infrastructure and much more. But a funding strategy was previously drafted. That happened over a decade ago. Developed countries committed to a collective goal of mobilizing some $100 billion per year by 2020 for climate action in developing countries. Now, that target was missed and moved back to 2023. We can't keep shifting the goal line. Also, ahead of the meeting that's going to be happening in early November, the countries were asked to submit ambitious national climate plans, but so far only a fraction have submitted those plans. There will also be some other theme days for focus talks and announcements on issues including gender, agriculture, and biodiversity. And finally, number 5. Why COP27 matters. Well, simply the world is warming because of emissions produced by us, humans. And it is mainly from the burning of fossil fuels like oil, gas, and coal. For the record, global temperatures have already risen over 1 degree, 1.1 degrees Celsius. That's done. And we are heading towards 1.5. If we can't help draw down the temperature, and it rises 1.7, 1.8 above the 1850s pre-industrial temperature levels, it is estimated that half of the world's population could be exposed to life-threatening heat and humidity. Now, the efforts that are happening now, the goal is to stabilize it so it does not continue to increase. Sadly, just days ago, the latest science tells us that we are not even close to reaching our global target of 1.5 degrees. It appears we are on track to warm our planet to 2.5 degrees. I can't tell you what that means. Climate change is a threat multiplier. It affects everything we love: our health, our economy, our water, our security, our food. All of it is impacted by climate change. And I wanted to mention one more thing, because the planet has already warmed, as I indicated, by over 1 degree. We are seeing those impacts. That's happening right now. And if we were to activate every plan, cut fossil fuel burning, closed up coal plants, etc., we will still see the impacts of climate change. It will take decades to see the full benefits. But that is why climate action right now is important. We can mitigate those severe impacts in our future. So there is hope, and I really believe that. We're seeing the impacts now. It's affecting our daily lives now. We can stabilize it and start anew. And it's important, but we have to do this together. We can stabilize our planet. The solutions are available, And it will have to be drastic, but it can be done, and if we implement that, additional solutions, advancement of technology and science will also become available. So COP27 can strengthen and hasten the international response to the climate crisis that continues to wreak havoc across the globe. Success starts with all of us understanding what exactly is at stake. I want to thank you for joining me today. For more on our changing planet, I welcome you to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Anwar Knight, and also on Facebook at Anwar Knight TV, and on YouTube. Maybe, in fact, you're watching me right now on YouTube. Please subscribe to my channel. And you can also, by the way, find and message me at anwarknight.com. Please share this episode. Remember, knowledge is a renewable resource, and our future depends on it. I'd like to leave you with a quote by Robert Anton Wilson. He says, "The future is up for grabs. It belongs to any and all who will take the risk and accept the responsibility of consciously creating the future they want." That is all for now, my friends. I'm Anwar Knight, wishing you a great day on the Big Blue Marble.
Hey, Dad, that was an awesome show.